Good evening, everyone. Before the start of the session, let us now chant Namo Tassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. All right. Let us turn to page number 297, please. Number 7. Right. Dependent on feeling, craving arises. Feeling conditions the arising of craving, tanha. There are 6 kinds of craving. Craving for forms, for sounds, for smells, for tastes, for tangibles, and for mental objects. Each of these again become threefold according to whether it is simply craving for sensual pleasure or craving for existence. Craving conjoined with sasataditti, eternalist view, or craving for annihilation. Craving conjoined with the annihilationist view, uchedaditti. In all its varieties, craving is ultimately reducible to the chetasika, greed, lobha, greed. Although craving is distinguished by way of its object, the craving itself actually depends on the feeling that arises through contact with that object. The craving itself actually depends on the feeling that arises through contact with that object. Right? So for some, they can take a liking to an object in a different manner compared to others. Whilst the object might be something which is pleasurable or that can cause pleasure, to that person inherently, that person might not have much pleasure from that object. It all depends on the contact, through contact with that object, right? Through contact with that object. And if we try to sort of broaden our understanding, we also know, as we've learned through the other chapters of the Abhidhamma, the contact that we have with an object, the arammana is taken in different intensities, remember? Right? An object can be grasped with different intensities. Kuddakarammana, parittarammana, atiparittarammana, mahantarammana, atimahantarammana. Remember? Right? So whilst the great objects are those which fulfills the sensory, the demands required by the pasada rupa to take the object fully, completely, with the mansikara now focused upon that object. Whilst we take one object, there can be other objects which are in the periphery, which the mansikara would not go to at that moment in time. So although we might like the other objects if the Manasikara was present towards that object, because now the Manasikara is not present towards that object, the greed doesn't arise towards that respective object. Remember? Yes, I think this was in the Vitimutta chapter. No, it was in the, yes, it was in the Viti or Vitimutta chapter, right? Now, if one experiences a pleasant feeling, one relishes that pleasant feeling and desires the object only insofar as it arouses the pleasant feeling. Arouses the pleasant feeling, right? On the other hand, when one experiences a painful feeling, one has a craving to be free from the pain, and one longs for a pleasurable feeling to replace it. Now here, we could also look at it in this manner. When it comes to Dhammic practice, the need to attain Nibbana, right? The need to attain Nibbana, or the need to attain to a sense of freedom from the cycle of rebirth and death, that idea can be proliferated by the need to escape dukkha and suffering, right? The need to escape dukkha and suffering can proliferate the idea of wanting, desire towards the attainment of Nibbana. And in the beginning, for most of us, this is actually what really fuels our Dhammic journeys. But as we progress along the path, and when we develop a better understanding of the Dhamma itself, that need or the support that we have, or the support that we sort of make as a flame inside of us, the passion that we have towards Nibbana changes. Now, whilst it earlier could have been fueled by the need to escape dukkha, now it is sort of proliferated by panya, right? When we go through the treatise on Dhamma, the purest form of Dhammic journeying in Dhamma is said to be that which is supported by wisdom. But the Buddha himself says, when he explains Dukkata Upanishad Shraddha, the faith that arises towards a path supported by dukkha, right? We can also understand a sense of Vanchaka Dhamma here. A sense of Vanchaka Dhamma, a masquerading factor, right? A masquerading factor within us, where we would assume that the need to get away from dukkha itself is prajna, which is not prajna. Do you understand? Right? Does that make sense? The need to get away or escape from dukkha is not prajna. It can, yes, fuel prajna, but it inherently isn't prajna. In the Patthana, not in the Patthana, in the Yamaka. In the Yamaka, this is explained as akusala, which gives rise to kusala. Akusala gives rise as kusala dhamma, akusala dhamma, avyakata dhamma. Kusala can give rise to kusala, akusala can give rise to kusala as well. Right? And kusala can become the root of also akusala according to Yamaka, but we will not be going there today. Right? The only reason that I brought it up, because it sort of sheds light on the intentions that we might have deep within us, which might be fueling the Dhammic journey. And it is very important that we are aware of these sort of masquerading factors as it arises. Because it is, again, as mentioned here, we will crave for the pleasant and we will try to distance ourselves from the unpleasant. On the other hand, when a painful feeling arises, one has a craving to be free from the pain, right? Craving to be free of the pain. Now, here they use the word craving, right? But this craving should not be mistaken for lobha. That is important. Why? Because lobha is always to do with accumulation. Getting rid has nothing to do with lobha. That is why the desire to attain Nibbana, the pure intention of obtaining Nibbana, does not come under the umbrella of lobha. Do you understand? Right? If lobha arises, lobha always has the intention of accumulation, not renunciation. Do you understand? Right? Dosa, or rather hatred, has the inherent energy to dispel, to detach. But that detachment is not the kusala detachment. It is the akusala detachment, which is fueled by hatred. Is that clear, everyone? Right? So this craving should not be taken or understood as lobha. It is not lobha. It is basically another, I guess they're using the word as desire, the need to be free from the pain, and one longs for the pleasurable feeling. This part is lobha. Longs for the pleasurable feeling. That part is lobha, not this part. Right? And this should be clear, because we know that lobha mula only arises with moha mula. It never arises, lobha mula never arises with dosa mula. Right? Because they are two very different dhammas. They are very different dhammas, entirely different, the complete opposite in nature, the complete opposite in nature. To replace it, neutral feeling, to replace it, yes, Dil?
Sorry, Bhante. Could you, I understood what you said. Thank you very much, Bhante. Could you say that this is chanda? I know it's not lobha. Or is it nothing to do with chanda, Bhante?
It has nothing to do with chanda as well.
Right. Thank you.
It has nothing to do with chanda as well. It is speaking of the craving to be free from pain, is speaking about the nature of dosa.
That's not what I ask is, Bhante, this need to have nibbana, that is not craving, but could that be called chanda? That's what I'm asking.
Could it be called chanda?
Yes, that need, that you don't crave nibbana, but could it be chanda, that desire to renunciate, to get closer on the path to the magga? So could that be chanda? That's what
Okay. So if you're talking on the lines of ultimate reality, we can't specifically say that it is chanda, right? If you're talking on the course of ultimate reality, right? However, if we are simply sort of talking or speaking in a colloquial sense, yes, of course. But if because nibbana, or the need to attain to a state such as nibbana, it is a situation of mind, an environment of mind, which is created by multifold factors. Just like, for example, we have the collection of indriyas and balas, which is all aimed towards Nibbana. We have the collection of the Satyesha Bodhisparshaka Dhamma, which is all aimed. Now, you see, Nibbana, although Nibbana is one, in ultimate reality, the journey towards Nibbana has always been explained through Dhammas in categories. Isn't it? Take the Eightfold Noble Path, the Four Noble Truths, the 7 factors of enlightenment, right? The 37 limbs of awakening. All of these refer, because why is this? Right? That is a question I would ask. Why? Why is that? Why can't we sort of, because it is supramundane. If Nibbana can be attributed with one specific, sort of the need to attain this Nibbana can be attributed to one specific mental consciousness or a Chetasika, it will no longer be supramundane. It will be very much within our sphere. Nibbana is not in our sphere. Do you understand what I mean by not in our sphere? Meaning it is not normal, if I might use that word, normal, right? It was very much discovered by the Buddha. The path to that situation, the path to that attainment was discovered by the Buddha in being able to balance those factors of mind. So yes, colloquially, we might be able to use the word desire, but if we are speaking to the point, then we cannot use one Chetasika to really define what urges us to want to attain Nibbana. Because if we take desire without prajna, what is it? If we take sila without prajna, what is it? It's nothing, right? All of these factors become something with supported by other factors of enlightenment. Is that clear, dear?
Thank you very much, Bhante.
All right. Does anyone else have a question? All right. Moving on. Longs for a pleasurable feeling to replace it. Neutral feeling has a peaceful nature. And this too becomes an object of craving. How do we know these things? Because of contact. Is that clear? Because of contact and the position contact holds, we know that these positions are positions that we have experienced and positions that we would like to get back to. Thus, the 3 kinds of feeling condition the arising of various types of craving. Right? So, inertly, through our practice, what we then aim to is to experience detached from craving. How are we able to experience but not to crave? Any questions? All right. Shall we move on? Does that make sense?
But
Yes,
excuse me, Bhante. Bhante, can you explain this? A neutral feeling has a peaceful nature, and this too becomes an object of craving. Could you please explain that a bit? Thank you, Bhante.
Now, when we take the position of equanimity or adukkhama sukha, here the proper, we might say equanimity, but equanimity doesn't do justice to the Pali word adukkhama sukha, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take it as, Anuma, if we think of it as a tug of war, a position, a Vedana connected to the experience where the mind is not pulled towards craving for that which is pleasurable, longing for something which is pleasurable, the need to have something, wanting something which is pleasurable, and a mind which is not dispelling that which is painful. That Vedana is something that we might like to experience. For example, when we experience Samadhi, we have a sense of liking towards Samadhi. That is the contact associated. Now we've made contact with a mental object being Upekha, right? Or something that we can draw parallels with. Now I want to go back there. I want to experience that again. How do I get there? Now the Upekha was or Adukkama Sukha was experienced. That contact developed a craving. Now through that craving, I want to go back into that position. That creates suffering when I don't have that position anymore. Does that make sense?
Yes, Bhante. Now it's clear. Thank you, Bhante.
Right. Anyone else? All right. 8. Dependent on craving arises clinging. Here, clinging, upadana, is of 4 kinds explained above. Meaning, what are the 4 kinds explained above? Remember, we went through this part here. This part here, right? Where we explained with regards to the craving for existence, etc. Right? Now, when that Vedana arises, Noeline, yes? Okay. Now, when that craving arises, the craving doesn't stop there. It is almost as if an object deserving of craving arises, or an object, almost as if sort of playing a piece of string or a toy in front of a pet, right? Creates that sense of craving for the pet. And now, once that object has been grasped, the need to keep it, hold on to it. Here, clinging upadana is of 4 kinds explained above. Clinging to sense pleasures is intensified craving. Intensified craving, right? A mode of Chetasika, greed. A mode of Chetasika greed. So greed becomes both tanha and upadana, or can be. The other 3 kinds of clinging are modes of Chetasika wrong view. The other 3 kinds of clinging are modes of Chetasika wrong view, ditti, right? Ditti. Each of these types of clinging is conditioned by craving. Each of these types of clinging is conditioned by craving. It is almost as if a person has never tasted something, but once, when the person now finally tastes it, the person is not willing to go back to whatever which was before. In the same manner, when that object has been taken, grounded by a certain view, why I need this, why I want this, now that settles as ditti. That settles as ditti. Now the craving that arises, each of these types of clinging is conditioned by craving. In the first case, weak or initial greed. In the first case, weak or initial greed for the object is called craving, while the intensified greed is called clinging. In the other 3 cases, the greed that conditions wrong views The greed that conditions wrong views is called craving, while the views that are accepted under the influence of greed is called clinging. Again, while the views that are accepted under the influence is called clinging. Does that make sense? Again, in the other three cases, the greed that conditions wrong view is called tanha, craving, while the views that are accepted under the influence of greed are called upadana. Right? This speaks about a certain sense of settlement, settling with that object once that object has been experienced. Do you understand? Does that make sense? Any questions? Yes, Noeline.
Yeah, Bhante, when you say there are three kinds of feeling, the first one you said is sensual pleasures.
Yeah.
And the other ones, are they wrong way, rites and ceremonies, and the third one is doctrine of self?
No, that
No.
It's Asadavada and Uchedavada, isn't it? The other wrong.
Yeah, it's the Sasatavada here. It's right here. Feeling conditions arising of craving tanha. There are 6 kinds of craving. Craving for form, sound, smells, taste, tangibles, and for mental objects. Each of these again become threefold according to whether it is simply craving for sensual pleasure, craving for existence, or craving for annihilation. Vibhava. Tanha.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe I was talking about clinging then, Bhante. Those are the factors for the clinging, isn't it?
No. So in the clinging, it's talking about these factors. So the same factors which are which tanha is present towards are the same factors which intensifies. Right? That is why they refer to the earlier one. The same factors or the same objects that you crave towards are the same things that you now cling to, upadana. It simply only becomes intensified.
Okay.
Right? How does it essentially become intensified? That is to answer the question of how. That is where the ditti is brought in. The ditti supports the further intensifying of that tanha to now become upadana. Now you don't want to let go of it. Why? Now it has settled in your mind that you might possibly need this, that this is the way, this is how it should be. And dittis that support that, dittis that support bhava, vibhava, karma, now get settled in the mind, right? Or else, how are we going to keep on doing it? You keep on doing it because you believe in something. What are you in this case believing? You're believing in the dittis that arise, connecting self to that object. Connecting self to that object. To connect the self and the object, where now the greed becomes intensified, that connection is ditti, through ditti. Yeah. And also, if we now connect that to the Eightfold Noble Path, we then understand why Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappa becomes the first steps in your journey towards enlightenment. Because to let go of the essential self, or the so-called essential self, that connection lies within the ditti, the perceival of belonging with that condition, the perceival of belonging with that condition. The sense of, in our lives, the sense, that mind which finds warmth in samsara. And we know we do find warmth in samsara. That warmth is found, a sense like this: samsara is my home, samsara is where I belong, this birth is where I belong, this life is where I belong. All of that is fueled by ditti. All of that is fueled by ditti. Yeah? Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yes.
Bhante, thank you, Bhante. So is that like, that's why the first, when you, the first stage, when you are going to be realizing Sotapanna, that is the reason why Sakkaya Ditti, that you have to break that Sakkaya of wrong Vitti, because there again it's a Ditti. So even to get to that first stage, that Sakkaya Ditti, you have to break the Ditti. Now
It
here,
is because of the breaking of Sakkaya Ditti that a worldling will never return back to a state of pratujjana, or worldliness.
Thank you, Bhante. And the other thing what you explained before, so what you're basically saying is, when you look at those tanha, the cravings of the sense organs, for the things like the smell and the taste, all those things, if it's a weak craving, then it's tanha. But when it gets intensified, then it's upadana, it's clinging. But when you take the ditti, because it has already got embedded in the brain and now had become an ditti, like an opinion. So that's why in that case, it's gone beyond the tanha, but it is now clinging or upadana.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's in the book. It's highlighted right there.
That's what you explained.
Yes.
Right. That's what I mean. So you explained it like that. So we'll enter it like that. Thank you, Bhante.
You know.
But your explanation was that. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah. I think, Bill,
Yeah.
now in the first case, they offer us this sort of weak, strong explanation, which is okay.
Yeah.
But I think a better explanation, or a explanation which offers far more clarity on the underpinnings of that essence, is this part, right? Which is the craving. Tanha is without ditti, and craving is intensified by ditti.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhante. Very good.
Yes,
Yeah.
Mala.
Bhante,
Yes, Mala.
Bhante, now in the first sentence here on craving, it says, Upadana is of the 4 kinds explained above. And I looked into it, and it says under Upadana, there are 4 kinds, which is Kama Upadana, Ditti Upadana, Silabbata Upadana, and Attava Upadana. So it's a different classification they have given in the same book. And here at the very end of the paragraph also it says, in the other 3 cases, the greed that conditions wrong is called craving, while the views that are accepted under the influence of that greed are called clinging. So there's a different classification in the previous chapters.
What is the page, please?
Chapter 7.
Yes.
And it gives 4 classifications.
Page
And
266, Bhante.
266. All right.
267. At the very top.
267. All right. 267. This 266. 267. Okay.
That's what I said earlier, Bhante, because I remember doing that. You know, the 4 I said earlier.
Okay. Let me see. Let's see. Right at the top. This is a chart. I have a chart on my book. chapter 7.
Bhante, they are the clinging to
Here.
sense pleasures.
Yes.
Found it?
You found it. Chattaru upadana, kama upadana, dittu upadana, silabhatu upadana, attavadu upadana. Clinging to sense pleasures, clinging to wrong views, clinging to rites and ceremonies, and clinging to the doctrine of self. Okay. So the parts of the Sotapannahood, isn't it? Yeah, essentially the parts of the Sotapannahood. 4 clingings to sense pleasure, clinging to wrong views, clinging to rites and ceremonies, and clinging to the doctrine of self. Okay, so page number 267 on those who have the same, this book that we are looking, 267. So cling to sense, thank you Noeline and Mala. Clinging to sense pleasures, clinging to wrong views, clinging to rites and ceremonies, and clinging to the doctrine of self. So we are referring to those claims, right? Which is encompassing of the same, but I think far more defined, isn't it? Far more defined than the objects that we went through with the greed. Because we find the sense pleasures are there, the wrong views, the rites and ceremonies, and though that part of it seems to be taking from the Sasada Ditti and the Uchcheda Ditti. Yeah, all right. So thank you. Now, shall we move on? Right? Dependent on clinging arises existence. There are 2 kinds of existence. The karmically active process of existence, kamma bhava. Dependent on clinging arises existence, upadana pacca bhava. There are 2 kinds of existence. Karmically active process of existence, kamma bhava, and the passive or resultant process of existence, upapatti bhava. Active existence denotes the 29 types of wholesome and unwholesome volition, or all wholesome and unwholesome karma that leads to new existence, or all wholesome and unwholesome karma that leads to new existence. Resultant existence denotes the 32 kinds of resultant chittas. Resultant existence denotes the 32 kinds of resultant chittas. They are associated chaisikars and material phenomena born of karma. And material phenomena born of karma as a resultant. Kamma bhava and upapatti bhava. Clinging is a condition of active existence because under the influence of clinging, one engages in action that is accumulated as karma. That is accumulated as karma, right? What does that essentially mean? When we draw parallels between tanha and upadana, tanha is a state. Now, if we even see the 2 causes which fuels the cycle of Paticcasamuppada, there is tanha and avidya. These are more states which are present. They are present, but it only truly gets activated once the object has been taken. The object has been grasped. When the objects, we are talking about grasping or working to keep the object at this present moment in time. At this present moment in time. So upadana plays a more active role because it is now trying to hold on to that object of clinging. Does that make sense? Right? That is accumulated. And when the mind now operates in that cycle, the mind creates sankhara. We know it is because those sankhara that we are in this realm of rebirth and death, in this existence of rebirth and death, because of those sankharas. However, upadana is not a passive process. It is an active process. That is why it is an active process, because it works in that moment to cling on to that specific object which creates a sankhara. The sankharas which are then used or gives rise to resultants through which we gain rebirth. Through which we gain rebirth. Is that clear? Hemal, you look a bit lost.
Bhante,
Yeah.
I am thinking that's the point we have to experience without craving. Is that the stopping point of samsara, Bhante? Can you please give us some advice?
I would say that we engage far more with upadana than we do with tanha.
Okay.
We engage far more with upadana than we do with tanha. We see upadana far more because it is the more active process. For example, if we take the three types of kilesa, anusaya, pariyuttana and vitikama, now we see the causes or the results of the anusaya through the vitikam and the pariyuttana, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? In the same way, tanha is like that anusaya. It is a state. Like avidya. The offspring is what we work with. The offshoot of that is upadana, the intensified version. That is what we deal with on a daily basis. That is what we fight with on a daily basis.
Yeah.
To want or not to want, to eat or not to eat, to beat him or not to beat him.
Yeah. In other words, Bhante, that is the most important point for us to minimize the samsara, no?
I would say that is
concentrate.
I think that is the place where we truly engage or actively now work in curtailing that hindrance.
Yeah.
Right? I think that is the active point where we now start curtailing that hindrance.
Yeah.
Where we start weakening it.
Yes, Bhante.
Right?
Because till passa it's automatically happen, no? Passa happens automatically.
If without yoniso manasikara, then it will automatically happen.
Yeah, okay.
But the more that we cultivate that sense of yoniso manasikara, but not only yoniso manasikara cannot on its own hold this down. That is why again the Buddha, when talking about the journey towards enlightenment, would again talk in categories, because you need a couple of powers in order to suppress this state that arises continuously.
Yes,
that is where sila comes in, prajna comes in, sila, samadhi, prajna, all three of those. That is where we then cultivate that skill to stop this from engaging.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Anyone else who wants to?
Bhante,
Yes, Mala.
it's about Hemamali's question again. Now we can't avoid Vedana, we can't avoid Passa. Then the next one is Tanha. Tanha means supposing there's something you like some people like cheesecake. What I thought, what is okay to enjoy it at the time, as long as after finishing eating, you just forget about it. So it's okay to enjoy it, isn't it? Enjoy it at the time.
Okay, so that's a good example, Mala. What you're talking about is not tanha. You're talking about upadana.
Yeah.
No, Bhante. Now even Buddha enjoyed the beautiful sunset and he enjoyed music. But after that, he never sort of kept on saying, oh, that was a good music. But at the moment, at the time of he was listening to the music, he enjoyed it and he said it was good music. But after that, he didn't go on about it. He forgot about it. Let go of it. So you enjoy something and let go of it. Isn't that okay?
Again, you're talking about upadana. Because you're talking about upadana, it's not okay.
Why do you say that, Bhante?
Now, Dhamma, you want to say something?
Yeah. Bhante, I think it's tanha, and the extreme end of tanha is upadana, clinging. And so what Mala says, actually, when we eat something, we have a slight feeling of tanha, but that will not give rise to clinging. So the dangerous factor is clinging, not the tanha, right? So we can avoid going further into the clinging by stopping at tanha. Do you understand me?
I understand. But the thing is, that's simply not true. The thing is...
Yes, Bhante. Now, when we eat something,
yeah,
right, we enjoy it.
Yeah.
But we don't go after it, right? You enjoy it and you finish it. Right? So that tanha is limited to only at the time of eating. The moment you enjoy it, that finished. So that tanha will not give rise to descent level. So what Mala is saying is actually even Buddha used to enjoy the surrounding and even music, but there's a limit for that.
Yeah. What I'm understood, and why I find now, I don't think it is also fair on us to take the Buddha as an example, because he was already an arahant, and also the other thing is that he didn't have tanha in the first place, right? So it might not be effective to take the Buddha as an example. However, because tanha is a state, a fueling state, and upadana arises right after tanha, even the urge to want to keep experiencing it would be upadana. Not in the sense of, this is the thing, not in the sense of this is all down to the complex way that we have defined things, I believe, right? Now, when we say even sort of the conditioning that we have to what tanha is and upadana is, if we are to take, let's class, anyways, anusayak vashe, as a what's the English word for latent tendency? As a latent tendency, tanha anusaya. Tanha anusaya is a state that conditioned by tanha anusaya arises all the other kilesas based upon the tanha anusaya. It is a state. if that state arises, the other state will surely follow. Why? Because it is the nature of that state. How do we then experience something? How do we then experience anything without the influence of craving, or rather upadana, clinging, without the sense of clinging? That would come with present moment awareness. So if we are talking through any scope of tanha, upadana will arise. We can't control that, right? We can't control it. If we are to say it in this way, how they have spoken of with regards to the resultant being passive and the active, it's opposite. Tanha is passive. Upadana is active. Does that make sense? Because at that time, when we come into that mental level, through development and cultivation of mindfulness, awareness, and all of these good stuff, the scope through which we ask the question will be different. Now you see, in that question itself, we see how upadana works. Through the ditthi. It is so deeply rooted. So deeply rooted. And the only way that we can then sort of live life without craving is present moment awareness, being in the present. Being in the present.
Bhante, is it being in the present? What about seeing like anitya, dukkha, anatma of that
All
object?
of which supports present moment awareness.
It's not anitya, dukkha, anatma one.
All of which supports present moment awareness.
Okay.
Anicca, dukkha, anatme haraha tamai api present moment awareness කියන දෙයට පත් වෙන්නේ.
Okay.
Right? The practice, it is through the practice that we arrive at present moment awareness. So when I say present moment awareness, then we are linking it to Sila Samadhi Prajna. It is only through that that example, that science example of how the medial cortex is the primary part of the brain which cognizes elements of objects. But when we become mindful, it switches to the insula, which gives us a more present moment experience of the object, which essentially reduces the craving that we long, or the longing that we have for that object. Rather, we learn, or the way that the brain now cognizes objects changes to living in the present with the experience of the present. With the medial cortex, what happens is we were always either in the past, the future, and comparing the present with the past and the future. In Dhammic terms, then that same thing in Dhammic terms is when we have tanha now proliferating itself into craving, upadana, what we have is a lot of reasons to keep holding on. With present moment awareness through anicca, dukkha, anatma, through the Arya Ashtanga Marga, through the Sattva Vishuddhis, through the 37 factors of enlightenment, limbs of awakening, through the Four Noble Truths, all of which points in one direction, which is the ability to live without longing. So, yes, music. In the Vinaya, this is explained about music. In the monastic code, listening to music is a dukkha offense, right? How is the dukkha offense incurred? Let's say, for example, the example which is given is this. This is the exact example. Whilst the monks are in the monastery, outside of the monastery, some music is being played. They say it is a concert of sorts, right? So you can't control sound. No, you will hear sound. when is the offense incurred? Now, mind you, this is for monks. Huh? When is the offense incurred? It explains that the offense is incurred the moment a physical action is made in aiding the listening to the sound. Do you understand? Meaning, I hear a sound, now I come to realize that it's music. Now let's say it's come from that direction. So now I kind of lean towards the right, hoping, what is that song? That moment is the moment the offense is incurred. The Buddha or any of the Arahants would not lean, would not make a physical effect to further sort of prolong the experience. That's the difference there. Do you get it?
So the sound waves, let it go through you.
Yeah, but yes, I mean, it's we can make a lot of jokes about it. It's kind of funny as well, but that sense of control, that sense of discipline, that sense of discipline, basically discipline, to such an extent where, yes, I hear the music, but no, and of course the sound is going through me, as Dhamma Center just said. However, I am not craving for its prolonging. I think that is that sort of, that point where a person, a mundane person, would intrinsically, naturally lean over. That need to prolong, the need to prolong is not there.
Bhante, is that what you say, Sute Suttamam Bhavissanti? We just hear it and that's it.
Yeah.
So that's what the way the Buddha explained that. Sute Suttamam Bhavissanti. It's just the hearing and that's it.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's, I think, it gives us so much more clarity, isn't it? On that difference that happens. The need to prolong doesn't exist. Wow. The need to prolong anything doesn't exist. And why do we use, or why do we have all these ditthis? Isn't it to just simply prolong? Amazing. Yeah, the discussion took us somewhere good, I think. The need to prolong doesn't exist. Okay. Dil, your mic is unmuted.
So basically all these wrong views, if you've got a view about it in this good, that is bad. If you have these views, we had wanted to prolong. So those are just, we are clinging on to them. These views that we have, right? This is good and I like to live here. All these views, I like my daughter, my son is better. All these are views we have. So this is where the upadana has already come.
Yeah. All of those which can then be categorized into sassata and all of these, the views, the upadana, all of that would fall under that position where it would be prolonged, it would be in connection to the contact which has arisen earlier. All right. Now.
Thank you, Bhante, for clarifying it.
Yeah, I hope that makes sense, Mala.
Yes, Bhante.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, in short, Bhante, it's experience, but not to crave anything. No?
I would personally stick to not to prolong.
Okay.
Not to prolong. Padma, you want to say something?
So does it mean that we can't really enjoy anything then? Till we
It means that you can absolutely enjoy everything to the fullest. It means the exact opposite.
okay.
You know, one of my very close sort of devotees told me, because my brother has just had a child. And so when I met with some of my devotees and they were asking about my family, I told them, and I told them my mother is quite inundated with the child now, everything is about the child. She barely calls me anymore, which is maybe a good thing. Anyways, regardless, so what my devotee said was this. She was like, Bhante, you do not know how, for a mother to have a grandchild, that experience is very different from having a child, because you do not have the burden of taking care, of having to sort of be the tiger mother or the tiger father or whoever it is, to sort of correct everything. You simply just have to enjoy the child. All the grandparents are like, yes, yes. All the Archies and CEOs are like, yes, yes. You just have to enjoy you can spoil the child, you give them sweets, you do not care two hoots, let them eat what they want, because you're not the father or the mother. And that stress of not having to control gives you so much, I guess, gives you so much ability to enjoy this being. Right? So Padma, quite the contrary, you enjoy everything far more better.
But not have an attachment to it.
Not to prolong it. You don't, at that moment, you're completely there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Right? Now, even in our meditation, something that I've experienced, when coming into new experiences of insight, those aha moments, those beautiful insights, almost instantaneously with the insight, this thought arises, I hope I have stuff like this coming up to, more like this. But more, that need of more does not arise. But because that sense of, I hope I have more of this, that has completely distracted me from the beauty of the insight of this moment. Yeah. Yeah. Damsri, I feel
Thank you, Bhante. That means
Yes.
I can listen to Lata Mangeshkar songs and then without wanting to prolong it. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, Mala, only at that moment, okay?
Only at that moment, only at that.
Bhante, so you listen to a nice song and you think, oh, it's nice. Then the next minute you have to say that's rubbish. Is that what you?
No, I don't think you need to even have a comment about it.
No, is that what we have to do? I mean, we listen to a song, it's a nice song. So the next thing we have to do is forget about it and, oh, that's not a nice song or that's rubbish or something.
No, when you say this, I remember one of my teachers, because in the Aranyas, kind of like, sort of having a sense of craving for something is kind of denounced, right? It is denounced, right? So even if the food is tasty, you would pretend as if, you don't care two hoots about it. Pretend. I mean to use that word, right? Because, that is the culture, that we have, because we are working towards getting rid of. But, so we find this very often, right? Even if something excites you, you pretend not to be excited about it, right? And one of my teachers back in Burma told me, if that is so, it's better to be excited than to pretend to be not excited. Because that falls under Vanchaka Dhammas, right? And a more serious category of Vanchaka Dhammas, where you are actually now trying to fool yourself, right? So the sense of authenticity, I think struggle here is, of course, there is no struggle. There is basically no struggle if the person is not a meditator, because you can't do it if you're not a meditator. How are you supposed to see that fine veil between these two sort of positions of mind, if not, So here it is truly being true to yourself and being in the moment. If something is beautiful, something is beautiful. You saying that it is not ever going to take the beauty away, right? If something is a sound or an appearance or whatever it is. But this is not about denouncing it in any way. This is about simply not prolonging it. And remember, both the lobha and the dosa are both mundane, hina, putujjana, olarika, laukika, all of these words that are mentioned in the turn in the wheel of the Dhamma. What's the sutra? The Dhamma Cakkapavatana Sutra. It applies to both lobha, dosa, kusala, akusala, all of those parts. But the thing is, we can't denounce everything at one go. Then we don't have anything to practice with. So slowly, we find ourselves into a position through our practice where we are able to remain within the present. At that moment, you experience without any need to experience it more than it presents itself. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Shall be 8:10. Clinging is a condition. All right. So this part then makes sense. Clinging is a condition for active existence, because under the influence of clinging, one engages in action that is accumulated as karma. Clinging is a condition for resultant existence, because that same clinging leads back into the round of rebirth in a state determined by one's karma. So as active and then as a resultant as well. Is that clear, everyone? Any questions before we move to the next? All right. So 10. Dependent on existence arises birth. Here birth, jati, means the arising of mundane resultant chittas, their chetasikas and karma-born matter in a new life in one or another realm of existence. In a new life in one or another realm of existence. The essence, the essential condition for the occurrence of future birth lies in the wholesome and unwholesome karma that is in present, karmically active existence. I think that needs no further explanation. Here, birth means the arising of mundane resultant chittas, their chetasikas, and karma-born matter in a new life in one or another realm of existence. The essential condition for the occurrence of future birth lies in the wholesome and unwholesome karma that is in present karmically active existence. වර්තමාන මොහොතේ අපි සිදු කරන සංඛාරයන් පදනම් කරගෙන හටගන්නවා විපාක කර්ම. ඒ විපාක කර්ම පදනම් කරගෙන චිත්ත විපාක චිත්තයන් විපාක පටිසන්ධි චිත්තයන් චෛසික ධර්ම සහ කම්මජ රූප හටගන්නවා. ඒ විපාක චිත්තයන් චෛසික ධර්ම සහ කර්මජ රූප we refer to as birth. Yes, clear, everyone? So then if one is to sort of ask what is birth in terms of Abhidhamma, then the answer would be this. Mundane resultant chittas, they are chaitikas and karma-born matter. Is that understood, everyone? Any questions?
Bhante, the karma-born matter, are they the 18
Yes.
you're talking about?
Yeah.
That's the pure octad and this and space and the 8 faculties and heart base.
Yes.
9 and 9, 18.
All of that. Associate, all, remember, all associated with the mundane resultant chittas. So that is important, right? All chaitasikas and kamajupas associated with the mundane resultant chittas.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, moving on. Dependent on birth.
Bhante, quick question. Bhante, quick question. When you said manasikara, you can influence manasikara in the process of contact. Yoniso manasikara. But in the thought process, yoniso manasikara is actually in the Vattappana stage.
I mentioned manasikara at 2 positions. One was through the yoniso ayoniso manasikara.
Yeah.
Other one was taking the object manasikara. Where dependent upon the manasikara, atimahantaramana, mahantaramana.
Yeah.
That is determined. I was referring, so when I use manasikara twice, one was with yoniso and ayoniso, which is Vattappana.
Yeah.
The other one was with regards to the taking of the object.
At the contact.
At the position of contact.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Once, okay, dependent on birth arise decay and death, etc. Once birth has occurred, there inevitably follow decay and death. And all the other kinds of suffering between birth and death, such as sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. All of this suffering is rooted in birth. Thus, birth is singled out as their principal condition. Right? As their principal condition. Here, referring to by birth, these parts here again. Because through which the kamaja rupas and then creating that chain reaction where the other rupas will arise, facilitating that birth, the karma. And it is those same dhammas which arose to give birth as a nature where all of this follows, inevitably follow decay and death. Kinds of suffering between, all other kinds of suffering between birth and death, such as sorrow, soka, parideva, dukkha, domanas, and upayasa. All of this suffering is rooted in birth. Thus, birth is singled out as their principal condition. Yeah? Shall we move on? Everyone? Damsiri?
Bhante, is it vipaka because of the vipaka, no? Is it?
Vipaka, because of the vipaka, patisandhi arises. As part of the patisandhi process, we have all of that shifting in the next birth, right? Right? And if you remember the patisandhi process, which was illuminated in that graph that we saw, the graph? Yeah, the graph, yes. Table, right, that we saw, which illuminated the rebirth process, right? So that whole process comes in birth. That birth is a condition for decay, death, and all the suffering. So, all of that. Okay?
Yeah.
Padma?
Yeah. In the chapter 10, where saying 10, when you say mundane resultant chittas, are you talking about the patisandhi chittas there? I mean, here birth means the rising of the mundane resultant chittas. This is number 10. I think we've just gone past it.
Yeah.
Is that the patisandhi chittas there?
It would refer to the patisandhi chittas. All the chittas that would give some sort of result as birth.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Here?
Yeah. Okay.
This part.
It's more than patisandhi. It can be other resultants too.
In a new life and one or another realm of existence. In a new life,
Yeah.
in one or another realm of existence.
Yes, okay, right. All right, thank you. Okay.
So that's all the 32 chittas then, resultant chittas, the whole lot.
The whole lot. Everything
32,
mundane, from the sobana, the
15 resultant chittas and 8 beautiful and 9 sublime.
Yes, all mundane.
Okay.
Yeah. Dependent on birth, arise, death, decay, and death. Did we just do this? Yes, we did. Okay. Thus arise the whole mass of suffering. The whole mass of suffering, suffering, mentioned in step 11, arises through the, how do I pronounce this word, please?
Concatenation, Bhante.
What is the meaning of that, Chamari?
The reducing or making it smaller, concatenation.
Okay, okay. Arises through the concatenation.
Concatenation.
No, concatenation is a series of interconnected things.
Okay.
The action of linking things together in a series, or the condition of being linked in such a way. That's the dictionary thing.
An example is a concatenation of events which had finally led to the murder.
That's right, yeah, something like that.
Series of interconnected things. Thank you, Padma. Thank you, Chamari, as well. All right. So the whole mass of suffering mentioned in step 11 arises through the concatenation of interdependent conditioning and conditioned states described in the formula. Right, described in the formula. Right, now the 3 periods. Right. So, which is essentially the whole mass of suffering mentioned in step 11 arises through the concatenation of interdependent conditioning and conditioned states described in the formula. So that is clear. It all supports one another in that process to arrive at that last position, which is that position of death and decay and the whole mass of suffering, right? Now, it should be categories of analysis. It should be understood that there are 3 periods, 12 factors, 20 modes, 3 connections, 4 groups, 3 rounds, and 2 routes. So the person who would study or have already studied the Paticcasamuppada should be able to define these categories clearly. This is essentially what Paticcasamuppada is. Yeah, 3 periods, 12 factors, 20 modes, 3 connections, 4 groups, 3 rounds, and 2 routes, which is all of which you find in the Mogok meditation Paticcasamuppada, that circle, that chart, the circular chart that we've seen, and I've showed you as well earlier, the Mogok Paticcasamuppada, right? The 3 periods. How? Ignorance and karmic formations, belong to the past. Birth and decay and death belong to the future. The intermediate 8 factors belong to the present. Thus, there are 3 periods: past, future, and present. When the 12 factors are divided into 3 periods of time, this should be seen as a mere expository device for exhibiting the causal structure of the round of existence, It should not be taken to imply that the factors assigned to a particular temporal period operate only in that period and not on other occasions. In fact, the 12 factors are always present together in any single life, mutually implicative and interpenetrative, as verse 7 below will demonstrate. There needs no explanation there, right? We can go ahead. The 12 factors: ignorance, karmic formations, consciousness, mind and matter, 6 sense bases, contact, feeling, craving, clinging, existence, birth, decay and death are the 12 factors. The term sorrow and so on are shown as incidental consequences of birth, right? Of incidental, yes. The 4 groups. Here, by taking ignorance and karmic formations, craving, clinging, and existence are also taken. By taking ignorance and karmic formations, craving, clinging, and existence are also taken. Likewise, by taking craving, clinging, and existence, ignorance and karmic formations are also taken. By taking birth and decay and death, the 5 effects, consciousness, and so on are also taken. Thus, there are 1, 5 causes pertaining to the past, 5 effects to the present, 5 causes pertaining to the present, and 5 effects to the future. We are almost out of time. I feel like this is an area we should open up next week. Shall we do that next week then? Yeah? All right.
So Bhante, we start from guide to 7 on page 300.
We'll start from we'll start from the 4 groups.
4 groups, okay.
Yeah, for the 4 groups and then continue. Yeah? All right, everyone. I will see you tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Bhante.
For the meeting. Yeah?
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Bhante
Thank you,
සංසාරේ
Bhante.
සංසාරේ නවත්තගමු නේද Bhante?
Thank you.
හාලම නවත්තමු නේද?
බන්තේ පොට්ටක් කියවලා අපිට කරන්න පුළුවන් නම් හරි ලේසි. හැබැයි හිතන you have to let go of your mind thoughts and you have to get into that moment without it and realize it.
I hope
පොත් කියවලා බෑ.
I hope people who are listening to this recording online. All right. Take care.
තෙරුවන්
Thank you,
සරණයි.
Bhante. Thank you, Bhante.